Thank you so much. So we're starting this series called Crazy Talks, the parables of Jesus. And Luke 14, this is the one we're starting off today. The setting is that Jesus is sitting down at the Pharisees' meal, and somebody turns to him and says these words, "Blessed is the one who will eat at the feast of the kingdom of God." A lot of Jesus' parables were around the kingdom of God, and it was acknowledged by the people of the time that when the kingdom of God would come, there would be this feast, and people would be invited to the feast, and there would be a Messiah who comes, and the feast in the kingdom of God was a picture of this time when people would sit down together and they would know God, and they would have the Messiah and the good rule of the Messiah, and there would be food, and there would be feasting, and it would be a banquet and a party, and people wanted to be invited to that party. Who would be there in the feast of the kingdom of God is the question of one of the people sitting next to Jesus. Who would be invited to the feast of the kingdom of God? And wouldn't they be blessed to eat there? And Jesus responds to that statement with a story. And we'll come on to that story. But in 1947, there was a shepherd boy who was just near the Dead Sea, and he was looking for his sheep. One of his sheep had gone astray, and the boy, he was called Muhammad Adib. He was looking for his lost sheep. And he couldn't see the lost sheep in the desert area where he was. So he wondered whether the sheep had gone into one of the caves nearby. And so he went to each of the caves and started throwing stones into the cave to see if he could get the sheep to come out of the cave. One cave, then another cave, then another cave, another cave. And then he got to one cave and he heard this shattering of pottery in the cave. It was quite high up, and it was a very small opening. He felt afraid to go in. So Muhammad Adib went back home, and the next day he came along with two of his friends, and they went into that cave to see what was going on. Why was the pottery being broken? And they found in the cave these rolls of leather. And they didn't know what to do with these rolls of leather, so they took them home. They were a Bedouin tribe, and they had them hanging from their tent for quite a few weeks. Until one day they went to this cobbler, this shoemaker, who works with leather, to take these rolls of leather in, this guy called Kando. And Kando, as he was looking at the leather, realized that there were little bits of writing on the leather. And he took them to his bishop. And these scrolls came to be one of the most exciting archaeological finds of the 20th century. They became known as the Qumran scrolls, the Dead Sea Scrolls. And they were essentially scroll after scroll of literature which had been kept there in those caves for 2,000 years. And they had been written and kept from the time of Jesus, a couple of hundred years before to 100 years after Jesus. 40% of the scrolls were Hebrew scriptures, what we know as the Old Testament. 60% were writings of the time. A complete copy of Isaiah was found in one of those caves, and it was the earliest copy of Isaiah, the full copy of Isaiah, which was kept, and it's 1,000 years older than the previous copy of Isaiah. It was an amazing find. But also the 60%, which were not the Hebrew scriptures, which were found in the caves, tell us a little bit about what people thought at the time of the messianic rule and of the banquet of those who would be invited when the Messiah would come. And who would be there? Who would be included? And so one of the scrolls, the messianic rule, tells us what people thought. The Qumran community was certain that no Gentiles would be present for a start. Only the religious pure who observed the law would be allowed to attend. And then it says the Messiah of Israel shall come, and the chiefs of the clans will be there. They'll sit before him, each in order of his dignity, according to their place in society. And then it goes on. But no one can attend the banquet who is smitten in his flesh, or paralyzed in his feet, or hands, or lame, or blind, or deaf, or dumb, or smitten in his flesh with visible blemishes. Qumran scroll SA 2, 5 to 10. That's what the people of the time thought about who would be invited to the great banquet. Nobody with any visible blemishes would be there, because that was a sign of imperfection. Be nobody there who couldn't walk, because they were seen to be less than pure. No Gentiles would be there. Only those who had been able to maintain that religious purity or their dignitaries would be allowed to attend. But Jesus comes along and is sitting there with a Pharisee, religious pure, and he's asked about who will be there at the banquet. And so Jesus tells this story, which is a crazy story for them to hear. And he says that there would be this owner, this master, and he's invited people already to the banquet. And now the banquet's ready, and he says, come, and he sends out a servant to come. But the first one who's invited says, I'm really sorry, but I've just bought a field, I can't come. The second one makes a similar excuse. I've just bought 5 oxen, 5 cows, I can't come, I've got to go attend to them. And the next one says, I'm really sorry, I can't come because I've just got married. And the master is angry, but then shows this radical generosity. And it says to the servant, Go out again and invite these people. Go out quickly into the streets and alleys of the town and bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame. Go and bring those people. This was crazy for the people to hear around Jesus. It was crazy. Now, we've lived with 2,000 years of Christian thought, which has affected our society. And so now we think if we have a time at Christmas, who should we invite? We might invite the homeless of the streets, and everyone thinks that's a great thing. Or we think, who should be part of God's kingdom? And we think, oh yes, those who are marginalized. We think that because of what we have heard for the last 2,000 years and how society has been informed by the teachings of Jesus. But at the time, it was crazy. It was upside down, topsy-turvy. The kingdom of God is like this incredible, radical revolution. Tim Keller puts it like this: when Jesus Christ shows up and says, I have brought in the kingdom, you can understand why it electrified everybody. He wasn't saying, if you elect me, I'll bring inflation down. Tim Keller wrote this a few years ago, but it's still applicable. What he was saying is Jesus saying, I will bring in the kingdom. I'm here to bring God's revolution. I am God's revolution. If you receive me, I'll bring his revolutionary power down into your life, and it will revolutionize your relationships with God, your relationship with yourself, your relationship with nature. I'll bring the kingdom power into your life and through it into the world. Jesus is always pointing to himself as the perpetuator of the kingdom of God. So the kingdom of God is going to come through me, and this is what it's going to look like, and it's going to be revolutionary. Your life will not be the same when you have that kingdom power of Jesus working in you. And the feast of the kingdom of God is a little bit of a taste of it when Jesus comes on earth, but it will be a taste of the final banquet in heaven when we get to enjoy that, and it will be so different from what you expected. Even today, if you're going to hold a party, if you hear a society party, who is invited to a society party? Often it's the famous, the wealthy, the successful, the powerful, the healthy, the strong. But in the kingdom of God party, it's those who are poor in spirit. Those maybe who are homeless. Those who can't offer much. The least. The lost. The broken. The marginalized. That's the kingdom of God. And when we set out here a number of years ago to try and plant this church, we wrote some words which are still on the website. We said, imagine a church that 15-year-old longs to be part of, and which the non-religious are drawn to, and it breaks all their preconceptions of church. Imagine a church which raises children and youth to be leaders both now and in the future. Imagine a church where those that are marginalized, addicted, or poor in spirit find friendship, freedom, and hope. And imagine a church strategically placed in the center of a town that plays its part in changing the culture of a town. See an explosion of love, friendship, prayer, creativity, hospitality, compassion, worship, breaking out. Imagine a church where people are drawn into an intimate relationship with Jesus. I mean, and we see on a Sunday a little bit of that. The kingdom of God, a taste of it here on a Sunday when we all gathered together, an eclectic mix of people. Nobody here religiously pure, all of us broken, where the marginalized and excluded are welcome as part of our church community. They're absolutely valued members. And how many other places can you go in society where you can just turn up, whoever you are, offer nothing, but you're absolutely welcome like everyone else? If you want to go and be part of a tennis club, you have to be able to be good at tennis. If you want to be part of a pub community, you have to pay for your beer. If you want to be part of something in society, you always have to, it costs you something. But the kingdom of God costs you nothing. And everyone is welcome. That's what we're hoping to see here as part of our church community that we represent. And that's why it's so important for us that on a Monday we've got Safe Haven Men, and on a Thursday we've got Safe Haven Women, where we treat those people with dignity and look after them. We want to have just the best time and do our best for them, because we believe that that's a little expression of the feast of the kingdom of God. And that parable of Jesus, it makes us think about two things. It makes us think about our relationship with God ourselves, and also our relationship with each other. It makes us think about our relationship with God, because all of us are not in the category of those who were invited the first time, the religiously pure. We're all in the category of those who were, when the servant went out and said, find the lame, find the blind, find the crippled, find the poor, find those who've got nothing to offer. That's me, and that's you. That's me, and that's you. When we come to God, we can't come and say, well, or my health is why I'm invited to this party. No, it's because of God's radical generosity to you. You can't come and say, well, this is my wealth, this is my money I've got to offer you. This is my success I've got to offer you. That means nothing to God. You're welcome at the feast of the kingdom of God because your willingness to come. When the servant goes out, the people who will come are the people who haven't made excuses. That's the only thing you've got to offer, is your willingness to accept the invitation. And so you and I are in exactly the same boat. When we're invited to the feast of the kingdom of God, the only thing that makes you welcome and able to be there is your ability to say yes. And it means here that there's a lot of room for people, because what happened is, first of all, the servant went out and invited all those people, and they obviously came, whereas the others had made excuses. But then there was more room for others. So the master says to the servant, go out and get some more. Don't be content with those who come the first time. Go out, and even says, compel them to come in. Urge them to come in. Because there's room for more. I mean, that's actually a great verse for us for this year. We've got a lot of people here. Our church is quite full. But there's loads of room for more. There's 90,000 people in St. Leonard's and Hastings. There's another 40-ish thousand in Bexhill, let alone all the villages. There's loads of room for everyone. So if we put ourselves into the story, we could be the servant who says, who's told, go out and compel some more to come in. Because there's so many people who could experience the love and the joy and the kindness and the power of God working through them, who are currently not yet invited. So our relationship with God is changed because we want to feel like we can offer something, but we can't offer anything. And so it means that all we can do is accept God's grace. So it's about our relationship to God and his invitation. But this parable is also about our relationship to other people. And if we put ourselves in the story as the master, what is the master's response when people make all these excuses? The first one says, I've just bought a field. The next one says, I've bought these cows. The next one says, I've just got married. All the commentators say that they're bad excuses. They're not great excuses because they've already been invited, and it's now when they're ready to do the meal that they say no. The master has the right in some ways to be offended by their excuses, but he chooses not to be offended, but he chooses to use that situation to show radical generosity. So you perhaps this week might find yourself in a place where you have the opportunity to be offended. Somebody might walk past you and not say hello, and you're expecting a nice hello. You've got the opportunity to do the opposite, to show radical generosity to that person. The opposite spirit idea, it's a phrase that I really love. And Sarah and I sometimes use that phrase, somebody's done something and it feels like, that's not quite right. Shall we be offended? No, we're not going to be offended. We will do something in the opposite spirit. Romans 12:21 is a great verse. It says, do not be overcome with evil, but overcome evil with good. Do not be overcome with evil, but overcome evil with good. And it's Romans 12:21, and 12:21 is an opposite way of writing 12. 21 is the opposite way of writing 12. It's a good way of remembering that verse. Romans 12:21, the opposite spirit verse. Do not be overcome with evil, but if somebody does something evil to you, overcome that evil with good. So if somebody insults you or criticizes you, why not send them flowers? If somebody critiques your work and you feel offended, why don't you praise them in public? What are the ways that we can turn offense into an opportunity to show radical generosity? You invite somebody around to your house and they decline. Don't be offended. Think who is not invited and invite them along. This week, you might well have an opportunity to be offended. But if you're going to show the kingdom of God at work in your life, choose that moment to do the opposite spirit. Because when you do that, the kingdom of God comes in a little way in your situation and in your life. A little bit of the feast of the kingdom of God comes to bear into your life at the moment. A little bit of our society is changed at the moment. A little bit of the kingdom of heaven comes to be present at that time. A little bit of God's revolution comes at that point when radical generosity is shown instead of taking offense. And so this message, this parable of Jesus, gives us a chance as a community to reflect the kingdom of God as Jesus taught it. It has the effect of allowing us to all come to know Jesus based on his invitation and not our brilliance. And it also gives us an opportunity to transform our relationships to be ones of radical generosity to each other. So that's the crazy talk of Jesus. And over the next few weeks, we're going to hear more of the parables of Jesus, more of the crazy talk. And we'll be transformed and changed through these weeks, hopefully, as we come to take seriously the parables of Jesus.